thank you for coming in to join me for this presentation. So this presentation is a second one that I've done on plant adaptations. And so today we're focusing on carnivorous plants. And as Tammy said, if you have questions, just put them in the chat. I will get to them as I'm talking, or if not, I will address them at the end. And we have some videos in here. We'll see how this goes. But first, as the director of the Ambler Arboretum of Temple University, actually, first, what I'd like to do is, if you could use the reactions button on your Zoom and just give me a show of thumbs up of how many of you have been to the Ambler Arboretum, that would be great. Oh, cool. All right, so we have a couple people that have been. So what I like to do is first just start off with a little video of what the Ambler Arboretum, sort of the history and what we're up to now. So we'll start there, and then we're going to move on to talking about carnivorous plants. So let me get this going. Oops, let me stop that. And sorry, I have to share my screen. Oops. Sorry. Okay. it's sometimes you just are like, oh, do I do this every day of my life? Yes, I do. But still, here I am acting like it's my first time. All right. So carnivorous plants of, we're going to focus on the carnivorous plants of Pennsylvania primarily, with one southeastern plant thrown in, and talk a little bit about the adaptations of them, why they are carnivorous, and where you might find some. But first, here's just a quick video about the Ambler Arboretum. There is, oh, you know what? Sorry, I have to stop share. I just want to make sure I'm sharing my sound too, since I am sharing a video with you. So let me just make sure that I share. Okay. All right, we'll try this again. So we'll play for start. Sorry, for the people who are going to watch this recorded version, it's probably torture. So here you go. Here's a little bit about the Ambler Arboretum. Okay, so that's a little bit about the Arboretum. We are part of America's Garden Capital, which are the 37 public gardens within 30 miles of Philadelphia. We each have our own collections and our own stories and our own history to tell and horticulture to share. There is a gardens passport that's available where you can mark off all of the gardens you've been to. The public gardens within America's Garden Capital have them available for free for you to pick up, and then you can visit all of the gardens. So I encourage you to get out and do that. And so with that, we're going to get to talking about some carnivorous plants. And I want to start with a clip from one of my favorite movies because I am a horticulturist and a nerd. This is one of my favorite movies, but I want to start with a clip that was probably, I don't know, in some cases, maybe our first introduction to carnivorous plants.
Excuse me, I couldn't help noticing that strange and interesting plant. What is it?
It's an orchard, too.
I've never seen anything like it before.
No one has.
Where did you get it?
Well, you remember that total eclipse of the sun about a week ago? I was walking in the wholesale flower district that day. And I passed by this place where this old Chinese man, he sometimes sells me weird and exotic cuttings. Because he knows, you see, that strange plants are my hobby. He didn't have anything unusual there that day. So I was just about to, you know, walk on by. When suddenly, and without warning, there was this... It got very dark, and there was this strange humming sound, like something from another world. And when the light came back, this weird plant was just sitting there. Just, you know, stuck in, among the zinnias. I could have sworn it hadn't been there before. But the old Chinese man sold it to me anyways. For $1.95.
Well, that's an unusual story and a fascinating plant. Oh, while I'm here, I might as well take $50 worth of roses.
$50?
Can you break 100?
100? No.
Well, then I'll just have to take twice as many, won't I?
Twice as many?
Twice as many?
Twice as many?
That plant in the window, it's simply amazing. That plant in the window, wherever you get it.
Look, there it is, Marge.
Oh my gosh, it's peculiar.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Come again. Come and look at the wheel of plants some more. It's just going to get bigger and more interesting.
Excuse me.
All right.
I couldn't help noticing that strange and
Sorry
interesting...
about that. All right, so for many of us, maybe our first introduction to a carnivorous plant was when we were introduced to Audrey 2 in Little Shop of Horrors. And I know that was probably one of my first introductions, and it's been one of my favorite movies ever since. Spoiler alert, in case you haven't seen Audrey or Little Shop of Horrors, Audrey 2 is a carnivorous plant and does eat blood and meat. And so, yes, so carnivorous plant. But Audrey 2 can't get the nutrients that he needs from the environment, so he frequently has to trick people into feeding him so he can get the nutrients he needs to survive. And I apologize for the caterwauling in the background here. My cat is making a lot of noise this afternoon, and I'm not sure, well, I know why. He wants to go outside. So he's making a lot of noise. So that's the noise that you hear in the background here. So Audrey 2, carnivorous plant. So Audrey too was an alien, as we saw in that introduction, and you know, people were invited to come back and watch and see what it looks like. It's only going to get bigger and more interesting as that tiny little plant grows. And meat-eating plants and carnivorous plants, when I mention to people that they are in fact a thing, people find it hard to believe that they are, and you know, it sounds kind of like science fiction to them that there's these meat-eating plants out there. But in fact, it's science fact. Carnivorous plants do exist in real life, and some of them right here in Pennsylvania. In fact, there's 23 different species, subspecies, and varieties of carnivorous plants that live in Pennsylvania. Some are fairly common, like this pitcher plant, Saracenia Purpurea, and then others are less easy to find. And you can see the habitat here, right? You can see how they're growing here. You can even see some flies on the outer edges of these pitcher plants here. So where can we find pitcher plants, or where can we find carnivorous plants in Pennsylvania? They tend to grow where soil nutrients are low or poor. And this makes a lot of sense when you think about it. All green plants make their own food through photosynthesis, right? They take the light energy from the sun and they convert it into sugars and water, and that's what the plant uses to survive. And the plants also need nutrients, right? So converting sun's energy into sugars doesn't necessarily give the plants the nutrients they need to thrive. So typically these nutrients are located in the soils in which these plants grow. So in the case of carnivorous plants, they tend to grow either in water or in nutrient poor soils. And so the bogs and marshes where you see a lot of carnivorous plants don't tend to have all the nutrients that these plants need to survive. And so they must supplement their diet. Basically, carnivorous plants are supplementing their diets in the same way that those of us who don't eat all of our fruits and vegetables and beans and grains that we should be eating need to supplement our own diets with vitamins. So in the same way that taking vitamins helps ensure that we have the nutrients we need for our body to function properly and that it stays healthy, carnivorous plants eat insects to get the nutrients those plants need to help with processes like cell development, regulation of hormones, regulating and facilitating the movement of food and water through the plant, creating DNA and proteins and other processes. So these nutrients aren't optional, they need them. And so these plants have adapted ways to get these nutrients despite them not being available in the soil. So you can think about how you fertilize your plants, especially if you are a container gardener. You know, your plants can't expand their roots beyond that container to get the nutrients they need. And once they've used up the nutrients, or you know, they find that in the soilless mix you might be using in your containers, those nutrients aren't available, the plant has to get it from somewhere. Otherwise, it will struggle. It'll go into decline. It'll be more susceptible to diseases and pest pressure. And so these nutrients are really important. So basically, fertilizing is like giving plants nutrients also, or vitamins also. So we're thinking about, when I say nutrients, we're thinking about nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, iron, manganese, and zinc. You know, those types of nutrients are available. And so the plants, in this case, carnivorous plants, have evolved ways to get these nutrients by eating insects. And these plants, of course, can't just go to a grocery store or a pharmacy and pick up the nutrients they need. They are literally rooted in place, so they can't get out and move around, or they're floating around on water surfaces or just under the water surface and kind of limited to a body of water. So they can't do that. So they've adapted, right, to eat insects. And so I just want to play a little clip of another video. This is a video full presentation today, but that kind of explains the different types of carnivorous plants that you'll encounter.
They snap, they trap, they stick, and they suck. This is the bizarre world of carnivorous plants, leafy creatures that eat everything from insects to crustaceans to mammals. I'm Anna, And this is gross science. The vast majority of plants only require a few things to survive: sunlight, water, air, and mineral nutrients, which they typically get from the soil or pond water they're growing in. These nutrients are elements like nitrogen and phosphorus, which are building blocks for making things like DNA and proteins. But most carnivorous plants live in places without a lot of nutrients, like peat bogs. So to really thrive, they draw extra nutrition from the bodies of unsuspecting prey. Now, carnivory has actually evolved multiple times in plants all over the world, giving rise to some wildly diverse and morbidly beautiful methods for catching food. So Vanessa from Braincraft and I bought a few carnivorous plants.
They're so beautiful.
They really are.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna show you some of my favorites. You ready, Vanessa?
I'm scared and kind of excited all at once.
Me too. Okay, so first, this is the bladderwort. These guys live in watery environments, but they have these small, empty chambers growing from their stems. When a tiny creature, like a crustacean, passes by, it brushes against these things called trigger hairs. The hairs make the door to the chamber pop open, and as water rushes in to fill the empty space inside, the tiny crustacean gets sucked in too. This entire process happens in less than 1,000th of a second. The video you're watching here has been slowed way down. Then the bladderwort releases digestive enzymes into the chamber to break down the insect's body and lap up its nutrients. After its meal, the chamber squeezes out all the water, closes the door, and is ready to catch more prey.
Wow.
But that's only one variety of carnivorous plant. Other types of carnivorous plants act totally differently. For example, the leaves of sundews are covered in delicate, wispy hairs, each with a teeny drop of liquid at the end. Thinking the liquid is actually delicious nectar, insects fly in to grab a tasty drink. But those dewdrops are actually sticky and trap the bug. The wispy tentacles curl around the insect, holding it tightly and maximizing the number of hairs it touches, which speeds up digestion.
What I find so cool is the way that sundews operate is like a botanical version of brains and muscles. So while they don't have any brain cells, they do have chemical signals to move, which kind of acts like a brain.
That's so amazing. It's a really good analogy.
Yeah.
The other really cool thing is that there are some carnivorous plants that actually capture prey without moving at all. So pitcher plants have deep basins filled with digestive enzymes. Insects venture in looking for food, but then they can't get back out. There are tons of different varieties of these plants, but in this species, called Saracenia flava, the inside of the pitcher is slippery, so bugs fall in and then can't crawl up the walls. They also have these downward pointing hairs at the bottom of the pitcher that make climbing out even more difficult for the insects. And some species of pitcher plant can catch more than just bugs. Certain tropical pitcher plants are so large that they've been known to trap small rodents like mice and rats.
That's scary. It's very scary.
It absolutely is. But next is a type of plant that might be a little bit more familiar.
It is more familiar.
This is the Venus flytrap. These plants have book-like leaves which emit a sweet smell that attracts insects like flies. When a fly lands on the leaf, it brushes against trigger hairs. Touching the hair sends a little electric charge through the leaf, and each charge stimulates pores to open, which allow water to move from one part of the leaf to another. The changes in water pressure make the book snap shut in under a second. However, the plant will only close if at least 2 hairs are touched in under about 20 seconds, or if the same hair is triggered twice in the same amount of time. Then the struggling prey needs to touch more hairs before the flow of digestive juices begins. This keeps the plant from wasting precious resources on a false alarm, like a floating speck of dirt or a curious human setting off the snare for fun.
So when you're talking about these electrical charges, you're really referring to something called action potentials. And these are signals our own brain's neurons use to pass on information to each other. So we don't tend to think about it, but it's kind of amazing how similar we are to plants.
Yeah, we don't tend to think about it, and that is really amazing.
Yes.
And Vanessa actually has a whole video about this over on her channel, so I will put a link to it somewhere on the screen. Definitely go check it out. It's So cool.
Thank you.
Anyway, these were just a few examples of the diversity of these deadly traps, but the variety out there is really quite extraordinary. In fact, there are over 750 individual species of carnivorous plants worldwide. And by the way, many of them are really easy to find and to care for. So if you have any of these plants at home, let me know, because I would love to see your gruesomely beautiful garden grow.
This one's really sticky.
Ew.
So a little bit just about how the plants work. In most cases, the plants offer something to the insect that the insect finds irresistible. But when the insect goes after it, the insect realizes that the prize does not come easily or may not come at all. Maybe the insect gets the prize, but that sets off a chain of events that makes it impossible for the insect to escape. And this is sort of like what Indiana Jones experiences over and over again on his missions. Oh, sorry, before I play that, I just want to let you know that there is a little bit there's a little bit of gruesome in this. It's a movie clip, so there's a little bit of gruesome in there if you are averse to that type of thing. Oops, let's play this. Sorry. There we go.
Give him the whip.
Throw me the idol. No time to argue. Throw me the idol. I throw you the whip.
Give me the whip.
Adiós, señor.
Adiós, Supiro.
So we can think about that clip as if we think about the pitcher plant and how those two women described how the pitcher plant works. The insect goes in thinking that they're going to get some reward for that. It smells like nectar. There's an odor that is emitted by the plant that makes the insect think that there's something rewarding down there. And then once they get into that trap, they can't get out. And there's multiple ways that these plants keep these insects from getting out. And so, you know, with the pitcher plant, it's got a smooth inside. So a crawling spider or ant can't get back up the sides and crawl out, or a flying insect is then trapped by those downward pointing hairs. And there's a pool of water in the bottom that if the insect falls in, they're not going to be able to get out of there. So there's these multiple ways that these plants are ensuring that they get the nutrients they need and attract the insects that they need to eat. So there's different types of carnivorous plants and they work in a few different ways. And we saw that in that video. And so just as a review, there's the sticky trap. And so I use this picture of the sticky traps for spotted lanternfly that we've seen around so much. We're trying to get away from these just because of the collateral damage of trapping spotted lanternflies on there, but you get the idea. So this is a sticky track, like fly paper or something like that. So a sticky sweet substance may lure the insect to the trap, or just by accident, the insect gets stuck to the trap because it's really sticky. But in the case of the plants, they use this lure, this fragrance and this look of nectar in order to lure the insect in. So here we have a sundew. And remember, so the sundew works where this liquid looks like nectar. So an insect comes and visits it. And then the chemical reaction that causes the closing is triggered by the pressure of the insect touching it. So it's a type of tropism, and thigmotropism, which means basically a reaction to touch. And once that reaction happens, the chemicals are triggered inside the plant to then start curling around whatever's making that movement. In Pennsylvania, we can find 3 different types of sundews. Maybe you all have seen this. And note the sphagnum moss that this plant is growing in here. That gives you an indicator to the type of habitat that these plants like. They're usually in acidic, wet, boggy environments, and of course low nutrient soil. So we have the round leaf sundew, which is the one you see here. And if you notice, this is a butterfly caught between the 2 pads of this round leaf sundew. There's a butterfly in there. Then we have threadleaf sundew, tall and skinny. And then we have spatulate leaf sundew. So this is the spatulate leaf sundew here, so sort of oval. And one thing you will notice about carnivorous plants as far as adaptation goes, these plants are pollinated by insects. So it's not in their best interest to eat every insect that comes around with them. Otherwise, they're not going to make any new carnivorous plants, right? So what you'll find is that these plants tend to send up these tall spikes of flowers high above where the insect eating part of the plant is. So pitcher plants send up this tall flower that looks like almost like a little umbrella. And these, here you can see the flower buds of the sundew. So these are getting ready to extend and be far above the leaves of the sundew. And so insects can pollinate these plants without getting eaten alive, but they still have the carnivorous component far below. So they have adapted, and Mother Nature's thought of everything. So another version of the way carnivorous plants work is this suction trap. And so we think about this like a vacuum cleaner. So this one doesn't use a prize to attract its prey to the plant. It uses a change in water pressure in this case. And so in Pennsylvania, we have about 12 species of bladderworts. They're almost all aquatic floating plants. And here you see the flowers of one species of them. But note how the flowers are not traps and they're sticking up. So this is aquatic plant. So it hovers just below the surface of the water, but it sends up this flower spike so that the insects can pollinate it, right? So here you see the flower. And then bladderwort, you saw in the video how a little miniature crustacean floated by, hit a trigger hair, which opened up a trapdoor, and that change in water pressure just sucked that crustacean into the little bladder. So here you see the little bladders. So these are all little places where crustaceans or insects can get trapped in there. It also helps to keep the plants afloat in the water, right? So it serves dual purpose. So that's bladderwort. There's a number of these, and there's some endangered species. So here's a raft of bladderworts that you might find in an area. And notice here how the bladderwort is floating. The flowers are high above the carnivorous portion of the plant, and then these bladders on branches radiate out into the water. So it's all directions, far above for where you need to be, where you have pollination happening, and also help keeping the plants afloat, right? And so we have that. So we have the vacuum, and we have the sticky trap, and then we have what we call a pitfall trap. And this one illustrated here is similar to what biologists and researchers use to capture insects for study. So basically there's bait, some reward, at the bottom, this could be a cup or a little dish or something with a piece of bait in it, and that has been sunken into the ground. The insect goes after the bait and then finds it can't get back out by climbing up the slippery sides of the cup. And so this is the way pitcher plants work. They're pitfall traps. And so here you see the downward pointing hairs on the inside of a pitcher plant and shiny smooth surface farther below where the insects can't climb up. So we call this type of a pitfall trap. So insects think there's nectar down there, and once they get in, they can't get out, or rarely can they get out. Sometimes you get bees in there and wasps that will actually cut a hole in the side of the pitcher plant and just let itself out that way. So you can find that happening, but in the most cases, that's not what's happening. And you can actually take a pitcher plant leaf, which this is what this is. It's a modified leaf, and you can cut it open and you can see all the exoskeletons of what that plant has eaten over its lifetime, which is pretty interesting. And then these plants secrete digestive enzymes through their leaves. So once an insect is trapped in there, that sets off another chemical reaction to start releasing digestive enzymes. And you saw in the video about the Venus flytrap that the Venus flytrap, when it closes, that insect has to keep struggling and hit trigger hairs again and again in order to release those digestive enzymes. But then that's what happens. So all of these plants release digestive enzymes like we do in our stomachs to help break down food. These plants do that as well to get the nutrients from the insects. So the digestive enzymes in the pitcher plants. So here we go again. This is Saracenia Purpurea. This is our native pitcher plant. Here we have, these are the flowers of pitcher plant. Notice how tall, how high above the carnivorous portion of the plant they are, so they can get pollinated, right? So so that there's a soup in that pitcher that is digestive enzymes and water. And then the nutrients from the insects, in all of these cases, the nutrients from the insect are absorbed through the leaves of the plants. So it just goes back into the leaf surface for the plant to use. Some insects, like I said, have figured out how to escape the traps. They can chew through the leaves from the inside. Spiders even have learned to spin webs at the tops of pitcher plants and other carnivorous plants to catch the insects before they get into the plant. They intercept the curious insects before they go down there. And some ants have even developed sticky feet that let them climb back up the slippery walls of pitcher plants. So evolution is always happening, and adaptation is the key to that. So not only have plants evolved to get nutrients from the insects around have evolved to get nutrients from the plant itself. And so the other kind of trap that we looked at, or that these carnivorous plants use, or this snap trap, right? And so many of us know the Venus flytrap. We're familiar with it. We saw in the video how it works, where an insect, it emits an odor that attracts an insect. An insect comes in, a lot of times it's a fly, but it doesn't have to be, and hits these trigger hairs. And if two of these trigger hairs are triggered within 20 seconds of each other, the Venus flytrap closes around it. And if those trigger hairs continue to be triggered by a struggling insect, then those digestive enzymes are released and the plant digests that insect. And then when that process is finished, that leaf will open back up again. And so that kind of works like our snap traps. So we have pitfall traps, we have sticky paper traps, we have vacuum cleaner traps, and we have snap traps. And those are the 4 basic ways that our carnivorous plants work that we would find around here. And so many of us know the Venus flytrap. You probably know that you can buy them very easily all over the place. At certain times of the year, you can find them in their little self-contained miniature greenhouses. You can buy them and bring them home and raise them. You want to do your research though, for a few reasons. One is these plants are adapted to low nutrient soils to eat insects, to replace those nutrients. And so you want to make sure you're giving that plant what it needs to grow in the conditions that it's adapted to. It's important also to note that these plants, these Venus flytraps are not native to Pennsylvania. So you won't find these in the wild in Pennsylvania. They're actually native only to a very small area of North and South Carolina. They're internationally listed as a vulnerable species, and they're actually being considered for listing as a federally endangered plant. So the fact that we can find them all over in garden centers and just buy them and buy another one when we kill the first one is not representative of the actual situation of these plants in the wild. The species is threatened by overcollection. So people are going into the wild and collecting these plants and selling them to people. Habitat destruction. And so you want to be sure when you're buying these that it's coming from a reputable source and you know how they're being propagated. You don't want any wild collected plants. You don't want to buy them. So you want to buy them from a reputable seller. And these plants are also endangered due to fire suppression. So another plant adaptation is that these plants need fire in their habitat to keep areas of open canopy in the forest where it lives. And without the open canopy, these plants get shaded out and can't survive. And they live in a forest fire ecosystem, which is a type of ecosystem. But through our human interventions of development and protecting our own property from fires, we have suppressed fires and we've changed these ecosystems. I come from the Pine Barrens in southern New Jersey, and that is also a forest fire ecosystem where the ecosystem is changing and certain plants are not thriving anymore because fire has been suppressed. And conservationists are figuring out ways to introduce fire back into those ecosystems so that that ecosystem can thrive. So just something interesting and important to note about this plant. Just because you can buy it everywhere doesn't mean that it isn't struggling in its native habitat. So we should be aware of that. So there's 14 species of carnivorous plants in Pennsylvania. So I mentioned there was over 20 species, varieties, and subspecies, but there's 14 different species of carnivorous plants in Pennsylvania. They tend to grow in very sensitive habitats. They are usually in bogs, wetlands, or ponds. And you can find them by visiting places like Spruce Flats Bog in Laurel Hill State Park Complex, the bogs at Loyalsock State Forest. Some of our state parks are state parks because they contain these unique habitats and these special places. And so you'll be able to find them there. And then closer by, there's the Tannersville Cranberry Bog Preserve, which is operated by the Nature Conservancy. That's seen here. It's not open to the public, but they do offer tours of this space, or they were. I'm not sure how their COVID has interfered with their tours right now, but you used to be able to take a guided tour with a naturalist in there that would tell you more about these special habitats. So you can find them. The pitcher plants and the sundews and even bladderworts are not difficult to find in our wet areas. You just have to know what to look for. You can also grow carnivorous plants at home. So while the Venus flytrap requires indoor growing, it's not hardy outside here. You can grow sundews and pitcher plants in outside bogs. You could make them yourself. You can make these bogs yourself and overwinter them. And so the carnivorous bog planters you see here were ones that I managed when I worked in Newark, New Jersey, and we had a 1.5 acre teaching garden in the center of Newark, New Jersey, and we wanted to show different types of plants. And so these have a variety of pitcher plants in them. Notice here's the flowers. They're really quite beautiful. In fact, there are some companies that grow pitcher plants and they sell the pitchers and the flowers as cut flowers to the floral industry. But you see different shapes and sizes of pitcher plants. This one is Flava. That's the one we saw in the video. That one tends to be a southeastern species. And then we have Purporia, which are those shorter, fatter ones, which we can find around here. And so all we did here in the winter, so how do we overwinter these? In the winter, we would plant them in the ground. We'd actually dig a hole for these containers, put them right in the ground, put some mulch or some leaves over them, and that's where they would stay for the whole winter. So that insulation of the soil from the hole would protect them from the freeze-thaw cycle that we experience in the winter. To make these, though, to make a bog, it's not a pond, right? It's not a pond that we're trying to build. It's not a lake. It's not something that's going to hold water standing so something would float in it. It's a bog. So it's soil. It's wet soil, basically. So the way we made these was we took these beautiful pots and then we lined it with pond liner, almost to the top of the pot, but not all the way to the top of the pot. And because the idea is not to keep all the water in. The idea is to keep a lot of the water in. And so this water does need to drain slowly out of here. And so by having the liner, the pond liner, you know, big black vinyl pond liner, by having that not go to the top, the water can seep between the liner and the pot and then drain out through the drainage hole in the bottom of the pot. And that's how we created a bog situation for our carnivorous plants. And they were placed, of course, close to a pond where insects would find them and hopefully feed them, right? So you can have your own carnivorous plant collection at home. There are nurseries and garden centers that sell carnivorous plants as novelty plants. And so they're not hard to find even in garden centers. So remember in the beginning of this, your plants might start out small, right? But we want to see how they get bigger and more interesting. And it's important to remember that you don't spoil your carnivorous plants. There's no need to feed them. Even if they complain and they threaten you, you don't have to feed them. If they're in the right plant, if they're in the right place, they will get what they need. You don't have to catch insects for them. And some people have asked me if you need to catch insects for them and give them the insect. And the answer is no, because if you start feeding them, you never know what might happen.
Feed me Seymour, feed me all night long. That's right, boy. You can do it. Feed me Seymour, feed me all night long. 'Cause if you feed me Seymour, I can grow up big and strong.
You eat blood, Audrey, too. Let's face it. How am I supposed to keep on feeding you? Kill people?
I make it worth your while.
What?
You think this is all coincidence, baby? The sudden success around here.
The press coverage?
Look, you're a plant, an inanimate object.
Does this look inanimate to you, punk? If I can talk and I can move, who's to say I can't do anything I want?
So that is something you want to watch out for, that they get a mind of their own. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions you might have about carnivorous plants. And thank you for joining me here this afternoon on this gorgeous day. And I've been watching the chat and I haven't seen any questions come up, but I'm happy to answer any. I don't know, Jean, if you still have a question or if that hand is still up from before, and you're welcome to unmute yourself and unmute your screen if you'd just like to ask a question. No?
No,
I made a mistake and hit the hand instead of the thumb.
Okay, no worries. No problem. If anybody else has
And it wouldn't let me change it.
Yes, I don't know. I teach, so I'm a professor at Temple Ambler. I teach woody plant identification, and my students all sit like this on the screen, so it's all just their names. And sometimes I'm ending class and nobody's responding. I'm like, oh, you all just walked away. You're pretending you're here right now.
No, I'm still here.
Okay.
I'm looking out in my garden, but I'm still here.
Yeah. So somebody asked to recreate the bog and the planter. How far from the top should the liner stop? An inch, inch and a half. It can stop, and because you do want to keep a good amount of water in there, and you want to have a good soil mass to protect the plants and to provide stability for the plants. So I would say an inch to an inch and a half below the top of the container would be good for you.
Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else? All right, everybody. Well, I hope you can get out and enjoy the rest of this gorgeous day. Thank you so much for joining.
All right. Thank you, Kathy, for today's presentation. It was wonderful as always. Like I said, within the next 2 days, this should be online on the Upper Dublin Township website, the Parks and Recreation website, which is upperdublinrec.net. And it will also be on the Upper Dublin Parks and Recreation YouTube channel. Have a wonderful day, everybody, and we hope to see you at the next class.
See ya.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tammy.
Thanks, Kathy. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too. See you later.
Bye.